Welcome to the New Rainmaker Podcast, a weekly show for visionary founders and team members alike to come together and share the heartfelt, the cringe, and the radically honest truths about what it's really like to build and work for some of the world's most exposed brands on the biggest internet stages. I'm your host, Veronica Romney, and after working for some of the biggest names in the online space myself, I've learned that it takes both leadership and dream team collaboration to truly scale a company to its greatest potential. You can build a business alone, but you cannot scale it on your own. And my goal on today's episode and every episode is to inspire our dreamers and empower our leaders. Make sure to follow and share my podcast with your friends and colleagues, and feel free to tag me on Instagram at vromney with your insights and ahas. Now let's make it rain on today's episode. Okay, Rainmaker Podcast family, I am really excited to have this special guest on because let's talk about human design. And this is interesting for me because my origin story is like corporate America, right? So like I know my Myers-Briggs, I know my Colby, I know the color, I know the letters and the signals, all the things. And then I jump into entrepreneurship, and what's really popular, has been very popular, is the Enneagram. But now here comes this new thing, at least for me. Maybe it's not new to you, but I feel like it's gaining a lot of traction in the entrepreneurial space, which is that of human design, which is not dependent on a test that you take at any particular moment in time because it's based off when you were born. You can't change that. So I'm really excited to explore this topic. I am just raising a hand. I am not as savvy or versed in it. And so I invited a very special guest, Miss Nicole Laino, who is a human design expert, to answer all my questions and hopefully yours as we explore the benefits of human design. Nicole, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Okay. And I know I'm already itching to dive in, but before we do, why don't you introduce yourself to the podcast listener?
Thank you. So I'm Nicole Laino. I am a former corporate girl. I worked on Wall Street for 7 years. I was also an actress. So I've had this weird, windy journey of getting here to entrepreneurship, which I sort of feel like is sort of a blend between those two things, between this tactical and very strategic approach that I do have a side of me that is very much ambitious and focused. And then I have another side of me that's creative and flowy. And I used to think that they had to be separated and mutually exclusive, but entrepreneurship is sort of like the baby between the creative and the strategy. It's like you kind of need both. And I think people like this are drawn to this type of work as well. So I'm a human design expert. I kind of found, or human design found me, is usually the way that people refer to it, because it does feel like it kind of comes into your life at the right time. And I've always been obsessed with human behavior. I mean, that's what acting really is to me, is the study of human behavior. It was building a character. What makes this character do the thing? What would make them have this crazy action here? What would have to happen in their past? That was always how I looked at characters. And that is ultimately what I do now with coaching and what I help entrepreneurs do, which is not dissect in a bad way or in a horribly detailed way, but can we look at the past and can we look at what's happening? Can we look at the behavior in the present and see what might be causing it so that we can make you the baddest, boldest, most awesome, authentic version of yourself? So that's what I do. And I'm also the host of Unshakable with Human Design, which I'm super excited about. We just changed the name of the podcast.
Yeah, this is exciting. Okay, so we have two podcast hosts who are going to jam out on something nerdy, which is to know thyself. I very recently was with a group of women who are all about human design. If anybody knows Jill Stanton, she's literally guest number one on the podcast. It is her hobby horse. And so there were so many times in a recent trip that I took with her where she was like, oh, it's because you're a Manny Gen. Oh, typical manifesting generator. I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about, but I'm here for it if it's a compliment, So let's just start, because even before we push record, Nicole's like, well, do you know what you are? I'm like, well, according to Jill and according to the online, test I've taken based off my birthday, where I was born, the time in which I was, all the things that cannot be changed on my birth certificate, I'm a manifesting generator.
You are.
But why don't we do this too? What is human design for those people that know what Enneagram is? They know what maybe Colby is, Myers-Briggs is, the color copy. There's so many. What's the big difference between human design versus all the other assessments that we take to know ourselves better?
So here's how I look at it differently. and why I was drawn to this more so than the others. Enneagram, I've recently revisited Enneagram and have a new love and respect for it. In the past, I had taken it online assessments and I had gotten different types. So I was like, how much can I really rely on this if it's different every time? Then I was typed and I got a different result than all of the other times. And it made sense to me, and I see how you can use it. Myers-Briggs and those things in the past that I've taken, I didn't really know what to do with them, or I also felt like they were very conditioning. It was like, you can't do this if you're this. You're going to do these things. And I'm very careful about the way that I talk about human design as well. I look at human design, first of all, because it's not subjective, because it is like, you were born at this time, you were born in this place, this is what you are, that it does kind of just cause you to surrender. You surrender to it and you just say, like, this is me. So if you look at the chart and with a really open heart, you look at it and you go, this is me. I'm going to start to accept these things. And I use it as a map. So I use it, it's an energetic, first of all, human design, the way that I look at it and what it really is it is an energetic map of who you are. It's a blueprint. I use it. I used to dance around like people's shadows and their behavior and all of this stuff for a really long time to figure out what is it really that's holding you back. And now I have this beautiful tool that I can look at it. I can hear that behavior. I can be looking at the chart and I can notice what the tendencies might be. And I can know the areas that should go into first based on the behavior, based on the person, based on what they are experiencing, and then also what's in the chart. And it tells me how to approach each issue, so to speak. I look at everything on the chart like a dial. Like, you have this ability to, and traditional like personal development is like, let's just try to like be the best of everything. And we're like turning all the dials up. And it's like, I sort of envision this like if you were in a recording studio and you have the producer there, the engineer that's got the whole big board of all the dials and knobs and the things that are going to balance the sound out and make it perfect so that the song sounds the way that they want it to sound. Human design is 64 gates, 36 channels, and 9 centers on it. Those are all dials. They are all little things on the board for you to push, for you to decide, do I want this one to be a little bit higher right now? Would I like this one to come down? What's going to make my song sound the way I want it to sound? And that's where I feel like the power is, because it's so differentiated down to finite details we can get into. And that's what I feel is different and so powerful about it, and why people are so drawn to it, because there's a little bit more detail into it, like where there's you can understand your purpose more. You can understand what holds you back more. There's so many applications to it that it's sort of never ending, but you see such growth so quickly.
Okay, I'm really excited about this. And I've said this before on the podcast, and I do get a little bit of slack when I say it, but I'm going to say it again. I love assessments. I love anything, any kind of modality, any kind of medium, any kind of vehicle that encourages someone to know thyself. There's nothing better than knowing yourself, right? And honoring yourself, like you said, surrendering, accepting that I am, that you are fundamentally whole and enough and awesome. But when I'm a team person, right? So a lot of questions I'll get is like, well, what assessments do you use in hiring? And I don't use, other than like a background check, but like I don't use assessments often in any kind of upfront recruiting. I use it more on the backside once I've hired the individual to manage them. But I don't like it so much on the hiring front, because I found what you also described, that given the day in which somebody took it, the state of mind, the emotional well-being, the regulation or dysregulation that somebody is currently in a state of, would dramatically change the results they received of that assessment.
Mm-hmm.
So people take the Enneagram the day that they're getting recruited and it says number 3, and then they take it again and it's actually a 6. And you're like, what the hell?
Yeah.
So that was my big beef with assessments, is it's just a very singular snapshot in time in which you took it. It's like also like when you get your blood work, like your blood work in one moment will not actually tell you what your hormones are over the course of like 3 days, 3 weeks, and things like that. So it's the same idea for me. So what I do like about human design, which is what I'm a human design curious person now, is that it's not voided of circumstances that can be temporal.
Mm-hmm.
It's literally, like you said, like you were born at a particular time and moment in space, earth, all the things. And so here we are. Remind me, how many different profiles are there like 4 or 5 in human I know I'm a manifesting generator, but there's like other ones, right?
There are 5 types. So those are the bigger categories. And really, what we're doing there is we're talking about the way that your energy works, how it's expressed and experienced by other people.
Mm-hmm.
So how will you be? And that's like that's the big dial. That's the one big dial where it's like this is the first one we want to focus on and make sure that we're in a high expression of this. You're not using your energy incorrectly, which for a Manny Gen like you would drain your energy. And honestly, everybody drains their energy. There's just different ways that we drain it. So manifesting generators and generators have the sacral center defined, and we are energy beings. We are here to work. We really love to work. I'm a
Yeah.
manifesting generator as well. I should say that. I'm a 5/1 emotional manifesting generator, and with our generator qualities, generators and manifesting generators, they're two separate types, but they're like a subtype of the same one, but we break them into two. Really, we're here to work and love the work that we do. Where we're drained is when we're doing things because we feel like we should, because there's obligation, because we've always done them. And we
Mm.
become kind of slaves to tasks. We become
Mm.
slaves to the people around us. We can become very easily slaves to the companies we work for. Because we do have energy, we do like to work, but we're working out of habit rather than really checking in with our gut, being like, I'm lit up by this. And there's a very
Mm.
big difference. When you're lit up by it, you make more energy for the task at hand. When you are not lit up by it, you'll be like, you feel stuck, usually is that's the language that we use. What most people use in human design, we just say you're frustrated. If you're in
Okay.
frustration, then that's sort of a sign that you are not using your energy. You're not working on the things that light you up, or you would not feel frustrated. You'd feel satisfied. That's the signature. There's projectors who are like the guides of the collective. They are what we call, I don't like the term non-energy beings because it sounds like they have no energy. They're just not
Yeah.
meant to have sustainable energy like the generators do. They're going to
Okay.
work in sprints. They're going to show up. They're going to kind of like, my husband is a projector. I'm surrounded by projectors. Everybody in my life is a projector. My mom, my sister-in-law, my son, my husband. They're 20% of the population, but they're like 80% of my life. And they have these bursts of energy, and then they just have this. They have it's a different frequency than they're at. There's a calmness to them that's natural, where like you and I are buzzing all the time to some degree,
Mm-hmm.
and people feel that. It can be very
Mm-hmm.
exciting. It can also be a lot for some people to be around.
Sure.
But for them, like my husband walks in the room, he's just chill, man. Like that's just
Mm.
kind of like his vibe. And they're here to kind of spew their wisdom quickly and then peace out, go take a nap. Like that's how they recharge themselves, is by like resting, and that's when their energy is best used. Manifestors, they're like 8 to 9% of the population. That's what Jill Stanton that you were mentioning. She's a manifester. Manifestors, they are here to be the visionaries, and they are
Hmm.
like, I have this creative urge to make this thing happen. So she's like, I'm doing Millionaire Girls Club. She
Yep.
made it happen, and it will have its time, and then it will probably like there will be
Evolve.
something else that she needs to do to keep that creative juice flowing. She's also going to need time in between. So running a mastermind is probably I'm using her as an example. I'm not critiquing her business model, but someone like a manifestor to run a mastermind where there's like big bursts of activity and then it chills out, and big bursts of activity and then it chills out. That would be good for someone like a manifestor, where it's like she's like, I want to do this now. And she goes and she runs like a Ferrari for a short period of time. And then it's like, and now I'm going to like rest just as hard as I just ran.
Mm.
And then we have reflectors are the last kind. They are completely open in their chart. They are more attached, more connected to the collective and the community than one to one necessarily energetically. I use Margaret Atwood as an example of this. Margaret Atwood wrote the Handmaid's Tale. She's a reflector, and they're the canary in the coal mine. Whether you agree with her assessment or not, this is just an example of the energy being used this way, that she taps into what she feels in the collective is to her wrong. There is this imbalance in the way that women are treated, in the way that the patriarchy is set up. There's something fundamentally wrong, and I need to share it and I need to tell people about it. So she wrote this book, and obviously it's become a huge phenomenon, television show and all of that, where that is her reflection of what she picked up energetically. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it doesn't all make sense.
at a much bigger, more broad level.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I have lots of thought or questions. I
Hmm.
have thoughts, questions.
Yeah.
There's just a lot going through my mind.
Lay it on me.
I've never number one, I've never met a reflector. Is that fair? Because what statistically, like they're the
1%.
oh yeah, so they're definitely the least common. Okay, so they're the least. That makes more sense. Yeah, I know. I feel like I know a lot more of the others, but I've never personally met a reflector or someone that told me that they were a reflector.
Hmm.
Number two, I've met CEOs, very very successful, ambitious CEOs that are projectors, manifestors, mani-gens. So like, it doesn't mean that only one type is destined for entrepreneurship. Yes.
Oh, absolutely not. It's about how
Okay.
you structure things around you.
I see. I see. Okay. Okay. This is fascinating. Oh my gosh. Okay, so let's talk about because this will. Oh, here, next question. I heard this on the trip with Jill. I can't remember who said it, but somebody was like, "Oh, because I am this, I try to hire this."
Hmm.
Is that accurate, or you're like, nah, maybe that's an overstretch? Like, do you find that if you know that you're a particular type, that you then would want to surround yourself with other either the same or opposite types to complement you?
So, yes and no. So, I agree
Okay.
both with what you were saying about hiring by looking at someone's chart. That I
Hmm.
don't really do that. I do run a chart. I'm not going to lie. I do run a chart, but I don't hire based on it.
Okay. Okay.
I do it at the end.
Okay.
And I know the energy that I need on my team at any given
Interesting.
moment. So if I need an implementer, I'm probably going to have a generator or manifesting generator. I'm also probably going to pick up on that when I interview them because I'm looking for somebody who is like lit up by the implementation of the work, does not want to be front and center. They want to be like my integrator, who I have is a manifesting generator with a defined route. And I did not hire her for these qualities. I hired her for the qualities that you get when you have somebody who's in a good expression of those centers. So, and in a good expression of that type. And she's perfect for that. Now, if I were to hire an OBM, somebody who's overseeing, I'm looking for somebody when I'm talking to them, I'm looking for more as a manifesting generator. I am looking for more of probably a projector type of a person, somebody who I'm looking for wisdom. I'm looking for guidance. It's kind of what I look for in coaches and with mentors that I've worked with are
Hmm.
but it's not a hard and fast rule. Do you have the quality that I'm looking for? There's so
Sure.
much more to it. I do
Sure.
look at energy dynamics, like when people have me brought in for teamwork, when we're looking at how their team functions, and they're like, things aren't working or things aren't gelling. I want to step out of this role. I might look at I do look at the charts because that's what I do with these people. I look
Sure.
at the charts, I lay them over each other. I run a composite chart of the whole team and I look at the energy dynamics between them and I see if there's any particular energy that's missing. It's usually the energy they know is missing. It's like
Oh,
we're just not able to really put this out there or we don't have direction. And it's like, right, well, you're missing this one key element.
I
So
see.
maybe you bring in a consultant, maybe you bring someone in for this specific purpose.
I see. I see. I see. Okay. And I think what I'm hearing again, because your world and your language is not necessarily like my innate
Yes.
or inherent language, but like what I'm hearing, number one, intuitively, we tend to understand what we're lacking or missing around us, or when our spidey sense kind of goes off. But two, I think what's cool about human design as a modality is that it's giving language to what we're missing because sometimes it's very difficult to articulate what it is that you feel like is off or that you're missing. You can just feel like it's off,
Yep.
and so that's powerful for anybody that doesn't have the right language to articulate what they're needing. They can use a tool like that.
Yeah, and
Okay.
to just kind of like add another point of clarity on there too. Sometimes it's not missing, sometimes it's just in the low expression of the person that you want to take on that role. Meaning
Mm,
cuz everything is a spectrum, like I said, they're all the dials. Everything's either a low, medium or high expression.
mm-hmm,
So if you want someone to take on a leadership role, they have leadership energy, but they're repressed in it, then that's what I would work with that person on specifically I'd work through that gate. I would, and there's something about telling somebody that they have it there. There's
mm,
something about telling somebody who's maybe repressed because usually when I look at a chart, everything that's colored in on the chart, it's referred to as defined. It doesn't mean that it's there. It means that the potential is there. But if you have a defined throat, but you grew up being told that you talked too much or that girls should be seen and not heard, or that
Yikes.
made you feel conditioned by, I mean, I grew up, my father said it lovingly, like he was joking, but did it have an effect of
100%.
he was like, you started talking at 2 years old and you never stopped since. You haven't stopped since.
Mm.
And it was like,
Mm.
and just that, hearing that, I know he didn't mean to do that, but those are imprints, right? So I had to decondition that. So even just seeing that I had a defined throat, that the power was there, was an activation for me when I got the chart. And it was like, no, I knew I had it. I'm not in a good expression of this. So how can I work on that? And that's where we take the channels and the gates and we start to say, like, okay, this is how I express myself. How am I not doing that? How am I not fully stepping into that? That's really what I work with people on. So if I worked with a team, it would be on working on those things, like get you to fully step into these. And there's something sometimes about, like, even somebody who's like normally in the background, to say, like, no, you do have leadership energy, or do you see it here?
Mm.
Do you see how this could be showing up? And maybe you're holding back.
Mm-hmm.
And then we work
Mm-hmm.
through that, and it's amazing the things that come out and what people are able to
Mm-hmm.
do in such a short period of time when you can focus to that level of detail.
Amen. Amen. I mean, so again, hearing you describe something that I have said in different ways or different words is very validating. Again, Jill's group, I was just in St. Lucia with several of them, and when we would get kind of one off, that's usually when I get pulled aside, like, can I tell you about my team stuff? I'm like, yeah, tell me about your team stuff. Sure. Like, what's going on? What's wrong? I love it. Right. And there was one situation, and she knows who she is. We love her. But she was asking me about how her marketing leader that she had hired is like coming to her with questions that she thinks this person should just be answering. Like, she should be in the
Mm-hmm.
position to answer the question. Why is she bringing the question up to the CEO? And I'm like, well, it's a newer team member, right? She's like, yeah, it's still in that kind of less than even 90 days stage. I'm like, well, have you empowered her to make the call? Like, have you actually, like, physically, literally used the words to empower an individual to make the call? Because the last thing that a new employee is going to want to do is disappoint you or let you down or make a decision that you would not have made. And now, what, are you not well suited? Because that's a fear, right? Nobody wants to step on their boss's toes.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, no, I haven't like explicitly empowered this person with those type of words to say, like, this should be your job. This is your, make the call. I'm like, you might want to just try that. You might want to just be like, hey, when you, and ask the question, compassionate curiosity, when you're asking me this question, something that I think that you are you're brilliant. You can answer it on your own. So it surprises me that you're asking me. So let me ask you, number one, why are you asking me? Number two, I want to empower you that you don't need to ask me, that I actually trust your judgment and that you can make the call.
Yeah.
Right. And so that was in the morning at breakfast. I saw her like 2 or 3 hours later because we had our spa services scheduled around the same time. And so she comes in, all bubbly as she is. And she's like, oh my gosh, Veronica, it worked. I'm like, what worked? Like, what? Like, I don't know what she was talking about. She's like, I told her. I went back right after breakfast. I sat, like, I slacked her. I empowered her to make the call. Look at her go. I'm like, oh, fantastic. But to your point, sometimes just being given permission. Now, permission is granted by someone in a power dynamic over you, but permission can be granted by, like you said, understanding your human design. Like, no, you were born this way. Like, you have this inside of you. It's been suppressed for one reason or another. That's really significant in someone's life.
Yeah, and we often forget about, energy dynamics of, and that's what the
Mm-hmm.
chart can help with as well, is to see, like, where you might dominate someone. So you're already in a position
Mm.
of power, but then energetically, where are maybe their natural kind of push pulls, or where someone might dance around you more. So if the CEO is emotionally defined and the marketing leader or team member is not emotionally defined, the natural dynamic with that, like, you're not emotionally defined, I am. You may, depending on your level of balance with that center, you may, usually the not self of that is to avoid confrontation and truth. So I don't really want to confront things. You don't seem terribly afraid of confronting things, but I don't like emotional situations. I don't really want to get involved. I'd rather just not rock the boat and I'll be over here. That's
Mm-hmm.
how somebody who's not in a high expression of their open emotional center might
Mm-hmm.
act, might act out of that fear, out of that voice. I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to do that, so
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to stay over here. I'm not going to bother her.
Mm.
That kind of thing. And if I'm me being emotionally defined, You feel that. My husband is not emotionally defined. I am. He does not like to get into emotional situations, particularly with me, because I will always overpower him in that way.
Mm.
Just it,
Hmm.
and it's not something that we try to do. It's something that completely silently we both feel. And seeing our charts and being able to explain that even to him, to say, I have emotions that are happening, you pick up on them. So when you come in the room and you say, are you okay? I know what he's doing. He's picking up on a current that's happening in me
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah.
And I'm just saying, I'm good. It's just something that's happening in me. I can say that now. It used to be like, no, nothing's wrong. Are you sure? And I'm like, yeah, well, something's wrong now. Why are you
Yeah.
picking
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Why are you making me feel like I'm doing something wrong? And that's the energetic conversations that's happening beneath every real conversation.
Mm.
So even just understanding those dynamics and how that might be working silently, totally not anyone's fault. Nobody knows it's happening,
Mm.
but it's just underneath the surface. So even just knowing that and having the team go, do you see how this might be playing out? I want you to feel empowered to be saying these things. And so I sometimes come in as that like intermediary to be like, let's talk
Yeah.
about the way that this works.
Yeah. Let's talk about the current. Let's talk about the frequency. Let's talk about the unsaid. Like, I mean, majority of communication is never verbal. It's not said. It's felt. Especially in predominantly female teams that I have been a part of. Woohoo! There's some feels. Okay, can we? I like want to be selfish here a little bit. I'm like, let's talk about me. No, so I'm a manifesting generator, but
Yeah.
you just kind of threw me because you're like, you're not emotionally based. Like, what is that? I don't know what you just said. Like, what did that mean? Is that the numbers component to the manifesting generator?
So first of all, for those listening who do know human design, V is a 5-2 pure manifesting generator.
Oh,
What that means is you are not emotionally defined. That's what the pure means. It means that your sacral is your guide, your gut is your guide. So
okay,
you may, depending on, and everything again on a spectrum is, how connected do you feel to that, or where there's work to be done? Do you feel like you go with your gut?
okay.
Or do you feel like you also have an incredibly defined ego? Like you have three channels in your ego and all the, and when I say ego, think of it as the masculine. So the heart center, there are 9 centers in the human design body graph. Now, if you've ever taken a yoga class, like chakras, the 7
Okay,
chakras. There are 9 in the human design body graph. So very similar, but we split 2 of them off into kind of like to get more detailed, so to speak. There was
okay,
a mutation in the way that we look at energy. And the heart chakra that we know is the heart chakra, we split it off into 2. So there's one that's more like, I look at it like feminine and masculine. It doesn't, nobody really says that. That's just my way of interpreting
sure.
it,
Your perspective.
is that the G center, as we call it, is the center of self-love, identity, all of that like beautiful love stuff that we normally represent with the heart chakra, where it's like, oh,
Okay,
it's my purpose, my direction, my love of spirit, my love of my body, like all of that, like even just the way I'm saying it, like love.
I know.
And then there is the heart, ego, will, which all of those names mean the same thing, which is a tiny little center with a lot of power that's motorized. This is why I look at it as masculine. There's energy that moves through it. It's not just like being something, it is driving action. And
Okay.
that is the masculine side of the heart, which is like put your heart in it, commit, go after it, the drive and the will to get something done, to stay in integrity with yourself and with others, to
Mm.
make shit happen. That is the ego will center. You
Is that
have
me?
you have that very defined in your chart. You have
That
3
makes sense.
channels there, and there are 4 gates in it, and you have all of them. And then there are 4 possible channels. You have 3. So
Okay.
it's a very active space for you. It's your most active space. So a lot of your energy is probably going to be coming from, I want it. I want that. I'm going after it. No one's going to stop me.
I'm decisive, yeah.
Yeah.
Fair.
What it could do though is it could override your sacral response, which is telling you what you really truly are lit up by. that
Okay.
that that would be the questions that I'd be asking is, are you doing that because you're sacral, because your gut is like, this will be so much fun, I want to do this from a joy of the doing place? Or is it being overridden maybe sometimes by, I want it because I want it and I get to have it?
Mm.
And that would probably be the play and the nuance that I'd be looking at there of between those two things. You can be very highly functioning in either way. It's just, is your energy going to be used in the most efficient way would be if you are like
Mm.
working on the things that really light you up. Sometimes they might be both.
Interesting. Wow, hold on a minute. Okay, so I'm a 5-2 pure manifesting generator. My gut is my guide. So something that I often say, because I wouldn't use the word the gut is my guide yet, now having talked to you maybe, but like I would say I'm extremely intuitive. My
Mm-hmm.
intuition, and I would say my gift of discernment has been kind of a compass for me
Mm-hmm.
in my life that I pride myself on. Integrity is my love language.
Yep.
So if that means, and that also means if I have to remove myself from a group and I am completely alone on my own little island, but in integrity with myself, I'll do it.
Mm-hmm.
So integrity is a big deal for me. I am decisive. I do tend to take action and swifter in yes. And I also know what I want. So like I knew that I wanted to marry my husband and he was like vastly, no, I don't know. I'm like, no, that's it. So even in my younger years, I've always been a more decisive human.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. Keep going. Keep telling me more.
So another thing, well, I mean, you talked about being intuitive. You do have your spleen defined, which is the center of intuition. So each center has a theme. Each center, there are
Okay.
9 centers, and each center has a theme. The ones that we have defined are the themes that we are meant to transmit, the ones that we are here to be, the ones that we are here to
Okay.
put out in the world. The ones
Okay.
where we are white or undefined on the chart, those are the ones that we are here to receive. That's where we're
Oh.
going to be more open. That is our feminine energy, if you think of it that way. Where are we receiving other people's energy? We're not the ones putting it out and taking up the space. We are the space and we're feeling it. You're doing that in your emotions. You're doing that in your center of inspiration. And you're doing that in your mind, open minded,
Mm.
which I always look at these things and I think that there's always beauty in a chart, but I think that there's a reason and balance that naturally happens in everyone's chart. And it's really making sure that the integrity of that balance stays there.
Mm-hmm.
And, with all of that ego energy, you have 3 motor centers defined, including your root, which is a big, big motor, and it's pressurized, adrenalized energy to change, to evolve, to create something new. And it's
Mm.
like the fuel for it. So
Mm.
you have that defined. You are here to kind of be that. Like you have the ability to be a big workhorse when you want to. I've also heard you say that like I'd rather work with small groups. I would rather
Mm-hmm.
like with all of this energy, there's an openness in your emotions where it's like you're going to be connected to people through their emotions. You're probably going to feel emotionally what people are going through. There's an empathy there.
Yeah.
A lot of people who are open in the emotional center feel like empaths or resonate with that to some degree, where for better or for worse, they're like, I could feel what other people are feeling. I can understand that.
Mm.
Given what you do, if you were all defined and you had all of this energy and you were not that that's a bad thing, but I think it probably gives you the warmth that people feel is that you're open and you're not all messed up in that space where you're like,
Mm-hmm.
you're throwing your stuff on other people. You're grounded there, but you have this open mind, and you have in its highest expression, there's always, again, everything moves and it's always moving. We go from the low expression to the high expression all the time. It's just, are we spending more time in the high? And that's really like that's what I do. It's like, how do I get you to spend most of your time, if not all of it? You're never going to spend all of it, but like, let's strive for that. How can we spend less time where we can notice the shadow, we can notice what our pattern is and go, oh, this is what I do to shift. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
this is all I have to do. Nothing's wrong with me. It's just a
Mm-hmm.
moment, and I just need to like take my hands off
Mm-hmm.
the reins here a little bit and glide through this. Notice it, be aware of it, and knowing
Mm-hmm.
what you're aware of. So you have the ability to be very open-minded. You have the ability to be inspired by lots and lots of things. In the low expression, you can sometimes get stuck there and think about things that
Mm-hmm.
don't necessarily matter and not feel confident moving until you're certain. Now, some of that might be taken over by your energy, like that wants to move. And that's actually a good thing for you. You don't want to get stuck in that open mind of being like, but I'm not certain. But what if this goes wrong? What if this? What if that? you want to lean on your definition. You trust. I would say, like, the game with human design is, how can I trust my defined centers? How can I trust all of my defined energy, trust everything that I'm here to transmit? And how can I love the openness and just allow it to be there and not look to fix it and not get caught in it?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the game. You have the entrepreneurial channel, the 4426, which is all about sales and marketing. And
Oh.
also, it's interesting having the 44, and the 44 is really about recognizing the gifts in others. So I always look at that as like, that's the back end team, and the 26, the other side of the channel, is the salesman, the marketer, the person that's out front saying like, hey, you need this. Let me show you why this is the best thing, why what I have is the best thing, and why you should buy it. And the 44 is going, let me make sure that the team is all set, that everybody behind the scenes has
Wow.
everything going. And so that you can go out and actually do your 26 thing, do your marketing thing. Without the 44, the 26 is just running around selling stuff, but there's nothing behind the curtain
Mm-hmm.
potentially. So I love that you've incorporated a lot of this into what you already do.
Gosh, Nicole, can you imagine how we recorded this podcast and you get on and you're like, okay, so according to your chart, you are in the wrong profession. Like, shoot, like, oh no. But it seems like all of my identity crisis for a decade of my life, because in some ways it's, and I just wrote about this in my newsletter or my report yesterday, which is my newsletter, the Rainmaker Report. Like, I've been in odds with myself for such a long time because there's visionary Veronica, and
Mm-hmm.
I can do the song and dance, and I like being on stage in a tight dress and Spanx and like in my power, you know? And then there's this part of me that's like, let me just hang out with the chicks. Let me just hang out with the peoples. Let me just hang out, and I love the arena. I love big ass launches. I just love it. It just like fuels me up. And I like doing hard things with other people, not in silo. And so for a long time, I thought I had to pick one or the other, like visionary Veronica, integrator Veronica. But I've finally stopped fighting with myself and just own both. And I was
Mm-hmm.
on a podcast yesterday. I was recording it with Paige Griffin, who's a member of my program. And the one thing she said on the podcast, she's like, because she's the CEO who went through a really hard thing with her team. And she's like, you sharing with me what the team was feeling was invaluable to me, because I didn't even think of it that way. I didn't see it that way. It just didn't even dawn on me that that would be how they were receiving what was going on versus how I was feeling at, being the reception of the same car accident, so to speak. So that has come up a lot where like, and it, by the way, it's hard. It's hard to hold space for both CEO and team
Mm-hmm.
because I can feel deeply what both of them are experiencing. And it's not like I pick favorites or sides. It's not like that. That wouldn't be in my integrity with that. But it's just like I can feel what's happening for both of them in the same situation at the same time and hold space for that. It's just odd.
That's the open emotional center.
Okay.
You don't have a consistent way of experiencing emotions. You feel them however the people around you are feeling them.
Okay.
However, so it's always different for you. I experience them the way I experience them. So it's something I take for granted. It's like, when you've always done something and you've done it well,
Mm-hmm.
that you
Mm-hmm.
it's like, I don't even know how I do that. I just do it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if I had to learn how to do it and I had to practice and I had to go out and get all these different teachers to fully understand this subject, I would have this much more in-depth knowledge of that subject. That's you with emotions. It's happening on an energetic level. You're obviously not
Mm-hmm.
studying it, but by staying clean in it and not getting wrapped up in it, thinking those are your emotions, the fact that you can be like, I know how that feels. I feel where this is coming from. That's a very high expression of how that works, that open
Okay.
space there.
Okay.
So when I was saying like there's no accidents, there's reasons that we have these spaces open and we have them defined. And I feel like that provides a really beautiful balance with what you do, that you're able to feel
Mm-hmm.
and receive all of that from them and then reflect back
Mm-hmm.
what you are feeling and hearing
Mm-hmm.
from them. That's a
Mm-hmm.
beautiful expression of that.
I feel like you're every, and again, I'm very team centric, so I'm going to say this. I feel like you're every team's like secret weapon, because you can help the CEO, to your point, what you said earlier, which is like helping a CEO realize either when they're not speaking up enough, but also where they're dominating way too much with those that are in their care, but also too to understand the dynamic of the team around them. I mean, seems like to me, correct me if I'm wrong, what kind of people do you work with best? Like they call you, they slide into your DMs and you're like, you're my person. What is that perfect person for you? Because I'm like, I want to give you all the referrals.
I love working with the conscious CEO, the one that I
Okay.
work mostly with women, but it's not exclusive, but I do work mostly with women. And
Mm-hmm.
it's the ones that realize that they have something to learn and that,
Mm-hmm.
that they don't know everything, but that they know a lot, and they're pretty self-actualized, and they recognize that they can't go it alone, that that's a team that I can come into is when they're open to the feedback and receptive to it. And I work with all different kinds of teams, but they're usually, entrepreneurs kind of fall into the seeker category. Usually we're pretty curious about ourselves.
Yeah, we are. Yeah.
So as long as there's not somebody who's thinking that I want you to tell me what's wrong with my team,
Yes.
that they're the problem,
Thank you, Nicole.
then my work begins with you to change that
Mm-hmm.
perspective. And
Mm-hmm.
then we look at the whole team together, because it's never that. And we're all, the other thing to understand too, is that we're all ourselves individually. And then when we get into a group, when we are in the company of others, energetically, it changes. So it can give you if you're open to having compassion and looking at everybody through a different lens, those are the people that I can come into your team, I can come into your world, I can come into your family,
Yeah.
and kind of blow your mind with how it opens you up. And that's where just quick, really profound changes happen, because you're
Mm-hmm.
receiving
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
opened up to something new.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm with you. I can usually tell on like a discovery call or a clarity call if you're my person, usually by how you describe your
Mm-hmm.
team. And so like somebody who gets on a call with me and it's like, oh, my team, they're just not as smart as me. They're not as good as marketers as me. When I start to hear some of that language, I'm like, uh-oh. Versus I think a CEO that gets on the call and is like, I feel like I'm letting my team down. Like I feel like I'm underutilizing them. I feel like I'm not leading them. I feel like we have the wrong softwares. Like there's this consciousness of like I am responsible for their care. There's something that I feel like I'm not doing in my mothering or my mother henning, so to speak, to like help them be as thriving as they could be. And I don't know exactly what it is. And I know they care. And like it's just it's just you can tell in which someone speaks about another person. I'm like, just here's my secret, guys. When I'm hanging out with you, when we're like, at a mixer, how you speak about those that are not in the room says a lot to me about your
Mm.
character. How someone speaks about the people that they employ speaks a lot to me. So what you said resonated with me a lot. Okay, how do people slide into your DMs? How does one work with a Nicole? How does one utilize the human design to elevate themselves and those around them? Like I really feel like what you do is so special. So how can people work with you?
Thank you. Well, I do readings, so if you just want to see what human design, take it out for a spin.
Yeah.
Signing up for a reading is a great way to get started and just get your feet wet and pique that curiosity a little bit, see if it's for you, because maybe it's not the right time for you to dive into this. But most people, including my very skeptical husband, who's like a computer programmer and has no interest in anything that I've ever done until it was human design, and he was like, "This makes sense to me." I'm like, "Get out of here. I never
Mm,
thought you'd say that." Most people find value in it. So that's a great place to start to figure out how it works for you. I do have group programs for people who are like not doing the team thing and who are looking to more focus on themselves.
sure.
My group program is, I do everything from deconditioning and getting you living in alignment to how you can start to apply it in your business. I kind of combine the two. And then I
Love
have
it.
my private coaching and obviously my teamwork, where I come into your
Mm,
teams and we work together over a course of a couple of months, usually, to get you all working in alignment, everybody. And I work with each individual team member, and I work with you
love it.
together, so that it's really a cohesive family that you have there, and that it's highly functioning.
Love it. Oh my gosh. Okay, so we'll just go to obviously we'll drop all the links at the bottom, but you can go and connect with you on Instagram, go to the
Yes.
website. I love to sign up for a reading because if you're human design curious after listening to this podcast, it's like the perfect next step for sure. So thank you, Nicole, for joining us on today's Rainmaker podcast. Thanks for listening to the Rainmaker Podcast. We believe you can't get real results or have real relationships that last without being real first. If you resonated with today's episode, leave us a review so we can keep serving up the truth and tips that help you become the empowered leader that I know that you are. And always head over to veronicarami.com to check out all the free resources I have for you and the show notes from this episode. Until next time, my friends.